Hello, I'm Donna Jones, President of Advocate Capital, and today I'm joined by
Rachel McCarthy, President and Executive Director of the Milestone Foundation.
Fantastic. Today, as part of our ongoing partnership with the Milestone Foundation, we're going to share how our organizations can help build a modern and sustainable approach to financing litigation for plaintiffs and their attorneys.
Thank you to everyone for joining. Donna, let's start with the modern trial lawyer. What are we talking about when we say the modern trial lawyer?
Well, Rachel, it's probably not a big surprise to anyone for an industry that reveres precedent to think about trial lawyers kind of getting stuck doing things the same old way as they've always been done. The word that comes to mind for me is inertia. And so, especially when it comes to the topic of financing and case expenses, case costs.
And what would be the old fashioned way?
Self-funding all the case costs with their after-tax fee income.
So, how would self funding hurt a case?
So when you think about a contingency fee lawyer, right, he doesn't get paid anything unless a recovery is made. So his fee is already a futuristic item, if you will. And then similarly, because these plaintiffs are injured and often out of work, they don't have the money to afford the costs that are associated with building a case. And so a plaintiff's attorney also advances all the case costs. And so when you think about it that way, a plaintiff lawyer is giving every one of his clients an interest-free loan for the duration of their case.
So, can you explain a little bit what you mean about the lawyers who self fund giving an interest free loan?
So lawyers, make their living by fee income, right, when they have a recovery on a case. And so in the self-funding model, these trial lawyers are constantly taking their after-tax cash, the fees that they have earned, and they invest them in the next new case, the next 10 new cases. And so it's really kind of a vicious cycle. They're on a merry-go-round that they just can never get off. And so it feels like there should be a better way for trial lawyers, right? They spend a lot of time and money getting to their profession, and they should be able to be lawyers and not the bankers for their cases. And it's not just potentially a bad experience for the law firm, right? The plaintiffs themselves find themselves in financially perilous situations. And so, what do you find that plaintiffs struggle with while they're in the pursuit of justice?
Sure. So, just to back up a second, the Milestone Foundation is a nonprofit and we provide plaintiff funding. So, what we have found is that plaintiffs, while they're going through litigation, oftentimes they've had an accident happen or an injury, and they might be out of work, maybe because of the accident or the injury, but they are waiting for their case to resolve or for their litigation journey to conclude. And in the meantime, they still have basic living expenses that they have to pay for. They still have to pay rent or mortgage. They still have utility bills and groceries and other expenses like that. So when plaintiffs are in this already tough, challenging time of their lives, trying to understand and navigate the legal system, and then on top of that, they might be feeling this financial pressure or stress from all the other bills that are piling up, that becomes a hindrance to their pursuit of justice. It could make the plaintiff inclined to settle for less because they either just want the lawsuit to be over, they want to have the asset that is their future settlement, in their hands so they can start paying their bills. Um, so it may have the plaintiff put more pressure on their attorney because they want this attorney to, wrap things up quickly, get them the money, and help relieve some of the financial pressure that they're feeling.
And so when you talk about financial pressure, How do you feel, or maybe what are some examples of how you've seen that impact the plaintiffs? Does it, for example, impede their physical recovery?
It could. I mean, some people might be inclined to skip out on treatments or, not pursue things that could make them recover physically more speedily, I suppose. Um, but mostly it impacts them because these folks are sometimes on the edge of being evicted and homelessness, and that can, all sorts of things can just spiral quickly. And so this financial pressure that they're feeling during litigation um, is sort of why the plaintiff funding industry was created. Unfortunately, there are a lot of companies out there that will provide funding at high rates, and then when the settlement is being negotiated, the plaintiff and the attorney have this awareness of this this debt that's been accruing. Um, and so that also will potentially impact settlement negotiations. The attorney might know that their client has taken out a significant amount of plaintiff funding, and then that kind of puts the pressure on the attorney to make sure the recovery can also cover that. So it's a tricky, it's a tricky position. Plaintiffs are often, know, like I said, already navigating a world that's unknown to them, hopefully this is the first time that they're going through, a personal injury lawsuit, but and then there's just a lot of other pressures that start to compound, I think. Donna, we've talked about this before. Our partnership makes sense because we both work with plaintiff lawyers, but also our missions align really nicely. So can you speak a little bit to what empowering justice means for Advocate Capital? I know empowering justice is something that's important for both of our organizations.
Absolutely. When we changed our, I guess, our marketing position, and made Empowering Justice our tagline, it was kind of a no-brainer for us because a lot of people might not know this, but our former CEO wrote a book called How David Beats Goliath, and it's the only published book specifically about the different options of financing available for plaintiff law firms. And so it is exactly that. It's the constant David versus Goliath fight. When you think about corporate defendants and big insurance companies, they have all the resources, all the tools, all the high-powered lawyers, all of the things. And so the odds are really stacked against a plaintiff attorney. And as you just spoke about, the individual plaintiff who, most of the time, Rachel, they've had the worst thing ever in their life happen to them through no fault of their own. And so to be able to do any little thing to help that process, because at the end of the day, it's about getting justice for that plaintiff. And as unfortunate as it sounds sometimes, the only remedy they really have is money to provide them with, future health care and better employment options and all those types of things. And so to be able to empower a lawyer and his plaintiff to pursue that road to justice is what we really think is a cool thing. We all have to make a living doing something, right? And isn't it cool that we can make a living, so to speak, by helping that process along? Um, what do you think of, Rachel, with regard to the Milestone Foundation's mission and vision, I guess, related to that topic?
Yeah, it's really similar in the sense of, we think about it as a David versus Goliath mission too. We are doing what you're doing, but for plaintiffs, and we're enabling a plaintiff and their attorney to see the lawsuit through to its just end by helping the plaintiff out with some funding that helps them cover their basic living expenses during the interim. So, really, like you mentioned, there are these high powered, heavily resourced defendants, and time is on their side. And they understand and can appreciate that the longer that they draw out litigation, the plaintiff might feel a little bit more squeezed. and might be willing to take less, to settle for less. So it's giving the plaintiff and their attorney a little bit more of a level playing field when it comes to having resources, having the time on their side, having um, money to pay for these immediate needs that might pop up during the interim. So so we think of it as an access to justice issue too. Our mission is to provide fair funding to plaintiffs, and that's both pre-settlement funding and post-settlement funding. But our vision is a little bit more broad, which is to really help influence the consumer litigation funding industry as a whole and bring more conversation around why it's been done the way it's been done, if there are ways that things can be improved and can be done differently. I mean, one thing that we is important to us is transparency. A lot of the traditional fund companies um, are sort of opaque or confusing with their messaging and their agreements and the arrangements that are being made with respect to payback schedules, et cetera. So we really would love to have an influence and an impact on the industry at large to make it more fair to plaintiffs, to make it more transparent to plaintiffs, and to really serve more as a resource and service to plaintiffs and not something that could be a potential harm.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned transparency, Rachel. It's so important for, especially for the plaintiffs, because they're already probably stressed out by the event that led to the litigation, right? And then the things you talked about, their everyday living expenses, a lot of times providing for their families. And so the last thing they ever need is another complicated process that's going to cause them more strife, right?
Absolutely. It's essential that plaintiffs have access to transparent and easy to understand sources of funding so they can focus on healing and recovery and, hopefully getting to the end of their litigation journey and then thinking about what the next steps in their lives look like. And I think when we talk about the modern trial lawyer, by giving your plaintiff, giving your client access to these things, you're really giving yourself a leg up, among the competition because you're really best serving your client.
Yes. Likewise, we designed and we've developed a proprietary software platform called AdvoTrack here, 27 years in the making. And so, but the idea was to make it easy and intuitive for the trial lawyers, right? And they have access 24/7. Most of the time, trial lawyers are working way into the night, in the wee hours of the morning, or on the weekend. And so the idea is, to make it easy for the trial lawyer to use the platform to cover the expenses without it becoming an administrative nightmare for either the lawyer or his staff. But again, enabling them to keep moving the plaintiff's case forward and not be inhibited by the cost of litigation.
That makes sense. How can an attorney start working with Advocate Capital if they were interested in, trying the AdvoTrack, or just partnering with you guys?
Yeah. So it starts with a simple application. It's online, short and easy, 2 pages. And I would say, Rachel, we underwrite very much like a bank. And so that's a defining difference in Advocate and some of the other lenders in the legal space. So we don't come into their office. We don't look through their case files. We don't make evaluations of what the cases might or might not be worth. Man, if we could do that, like we'd have the crystal ball, right? Everybody would want to partner with us. And so we base it on the premise of prior performance should be a good predictor of the future. And so set up a line of credit again for the law firm. And then as they spend money to advance their cases, they fund that on the line of credit. And so the idea is use our money, not theirs. And then that way they have plenty of options for their own after tax cash, whether it's, they have to make payroll, they have to hire more staff, whatever that looks like. And so again, transparency is the key. Make it easy to use because no lending option is going to be viable if it's difficult for them to use, right?
Mhm.
And so I guess, Rachel, similarly, if we have a lawyer or even a plaintiff watching today, what would they do to get started with the Milestone Foundation?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. We really partner with attorneys. We don't market to plaintiffs directly, but we work with firms to provide their clients with funding when they have an immediate need for their basic living expenses. So we just direct the attorney or the attorney to direct their client to our website, and they simply can go there and click on apply for funding. There are two different forms, one if it's a pre-settlement funding request and one if it's post-settlement funding. And the client or a paralegal or attorney can fill out the form, and it's a really easy process that puts you right in our queue. Our case manager reaches out within a day to get additional information. He speaks with the plaintiff, he speaks with someone from the law firm, and then the funding request moves along to be considered for approval by our committee, an underwriting committee. So it's really easy. It usually takes a couple of days from start to finish. And, we try to help as many plaintiffs as we can. We are a small nonprofit, but sometimes our resources are limited. But, we're always trying to do most good for the most amount of people. So, the website is really the best place to start.
Yeah. And so when you think about what you do at the Milestone Foundation, it is a more modern approach, right? You complete the application online and that type of thing. How would you say it benefits a plaintiff the most or more to have this type of lending available with the Milestone Foundation versus other plaintiff lenders in the market?
Yeah. So the reason why I think this is a bit modern is because the way that we do it as a nonprofit is completely different than how anyone has done it traditionally. So all of the other funding companies that are out there, and there are many, they all have a for-profit business model. So they are able to provide this necessary service. There is certainly a need for plaintiff funding to help plaintiffs get through, pay their bills and get to their settlement, see the end of their lawsuit, their just resolution. But all of the companies that have historically been in the consumer litigation funding space have been for profit. So they just have a different business model. We are the first and only option or alternative out there to do it as a nonprofit. So our rates are lower, our timeline is a little different, and we're just out here to provide a service to as many plaintiffs as we can. So attorneys that are willing to try new things, to adapt, I would be willing, those that are more open-minded to giving, new companies, and we're not even new. I mean, this is our 10-year anniversary this year, but a lot of folks still don't know about it. So we are sort of a newer model, we're a newer concept, and I think the attorneys that are more agile and willing to try new things, are those modern trial lawyers that are going to be successful because they'll see how this works and how this best serves their clients, and then they won't look back. So, um, I think that's how we help the firm and we help the client, and we hope to continue to help and influence the industry. So similarly, I just wanted to ask you, Donna, how do firms that are working with you, first of all, like, how does that help define the modern trial lawyer? And how does Advocate Capital help give them an advantage beyond case expenses?
Yeah, it's interesting, Rachel, when we talk to them, and they've been with us a year or 2 years or five. Actually, our very first customer from 1999 is still a client. He's been with us since the beginning, and so they say things like, "I didn't know how much I was missing out by continuing to reinvest my fees in every case. And it's allowed me to do things like more advertising or hire more lawyers, or, most importantly, it's allowed me to take more cases and help more plaintiffs get justice. Because at the same time, if you've got, 20 cases that you're trying to advance, you don't just pay the costs on one, right? All 20 of them demand and deserve the same amount of attention and financial investment. And so it just really gives them a lot more freedom in terms of what they do with their own cash, because they're using ours to advance the case costs. And the other thing I would say about that is, clients tell us that because they have that financial freedom, because they invest more in every client's case, most of the time it ends up providing the plaintiff with a larger settlement or verdict, because they're able to fully invest in every case and give it the attention that it really deserves. So that's kind of what we've heard from our clients over the years.
Yeah, it seems like a no-brainer, but one question for you is, what do you think is one of the biggest hurdles that attorneys face when they think about trying something new, like trying AdvoTrack and trying a partnership with Advocate Capital? What are some of the reasons why they might be reluctant to just go ahead? Because it makes so much sense. It sounds very sensible and reasonable to me, but I'm sure you encounter a little bit of hesitancy sometimes.
We do. I would say that, again, the number one thing is inertia. No lawyer wants to be the first one in his market to try something different, right? Just in case it doesn't work out like it's supposed to. And we hear things like, is one of my favorites, I don't need the money. Right? All these lawyers have a war chest that they've invested in. And, what I would say is, well, that's great. Number one, if you needed the money, you probably wouldn't qualify for this product, but that's a different thing. But also, the best time to establish a line of credit or financing is before you need it,
Right.
not when you need it. Yeah, and certainly not after. And so, and occasionally, clients will tell us that they're worried if their client will object to the interest pass-through concept of our model. And most of them say that's not an issue because the clients understand, right? It's like a mortgage. The lawyer's going to advance all the costs, and there's going to be a little interest because they're going to finance that. But the good news is that's going to be paid at the end out of the settlement proceeds, just like the other advance costs. And so most of the time, when a prospective lawyer or law firm is speaking with us, the real key, as you know, Rachel, is to hear it from a peer or a colleague. We get, I don't 60, 70% of our new business referrals from existing clients. And so, again, I do think it's inertia. They've done it so long, hundreds of years the
Sure.
same way.
Yeah.
um,
No, I think the
and
same
so,
thing goes for us too at the Milestone Foundation. A lot of people, or a lot of attorneys, they have their established relationships, or they just have their way that they operate, and it's sort of like, if it ain't broke, why fix it? One of those thought processes. But um, I think that once they hear from some of their colleagues, or they read it on a listserv or something, that there's an alternative option out there, then they become a little more willing to try something new. But these attorneys already have so much on their plate. They're not necessarily having the time to do an audit of who they're partnering with and what resources they're using and what they could be doing better. So I think that sometimes it's just about timing, or hearing it from the right person, or hearing it at the right time, where you might think, "Oh, yeah, I guess I've always done it this way," but that doesn't, maybe this is like a good time to consider that might not be the best way.
yeah, and or the other thing, Rachel, too, we hear, it ends up on the firm administrator's desk, right? And they've already got, 900 things, and it's just, one more thing on their list. And so,
Yeah.
definitely. Rachel, as we look to close this out today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact of the work that both of our organizations do. Um, it's easy to just look at the numbers and gloss over the real tangible impact. And so when you think about that, what makes the effort of the Milestone Foundation real and worthwhile for you?
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting spot at the Milestone Foundation because we're very much a part of the legal industry and we feel like we are a part of the legal industry, but we're also a nonprofit. And we have this whole other identity that is being a nonprofit organization, providing a service for the public good. We're a public charity, a 501(c)(3). So we have this huge part of our work that is helping others and making an impact, making a difference on individual lives. And I think it's hard for sometimes it's hard for us to keep that in mind when we're so caught up in the day-to-day number crunching and relationship building and all these legal conversations that we're having. So, for me, a really nice piece is when I get an alert on my phone about a new Google review. So I somehow turned on my notifications recently, and now when somebody leaves us a Google review, I get a real-time notification. And but it's delightful because it'll happen in off hours, it'll happen on a Sunday night, or it'll happen while I'm at swim lessons with my kids, and it gives me pause to hear some real-time feedback from plaintiffs that we've been able to support, and they're saying, "Thank you so much. You've saved my family. You've changed my life. You kept me in my home." And that's when it happens, when the feedback comes really unexpectedly, but it's so rewarding to hear. That's when I'm like, "Yeah, we're doing something good. We're on the right track here." Like, it's just really reaffirming of the work that we're doing because being a nonprofit has a lot of challenges. It's not easy. It's really not easy to make it, in any industry as a nonprofit. So, to get that reassurance and to get that positive feedback from the plaintiffs that we're helping is really nice. It's helps us keep going. What about you, Donna? What's some of the impact of the real time, tangible impact of the work that Advocate Capital sees with their clients and some of the wins that you get to celebrate with your clients?
Yeah, that is the most rewarding part is hearing the results, right? This awful thing happened to this plaintiff and, 5 years of litigation and trial and, they finally get a verdict and, it changes their lives. And so it's become so important to us that we also have a podcast called Cases That Made a Difference. And that's all we talk about is have the lawyers come on and talk about the cases and what they did. And the most amazing thing to me, Rachel, is not only are these lawyers and law firms working hard, physically, intellectually, financially to help these plaintiffs, but the verdicts often, and sometimes the settlements that they change the world. And I don't think people realize that and give trial lawyers enough credit. Like we've seen cases where, millions of cars have been recalled because of a safety defect, or, they change public policy about how 911 phone calls are handled. Just, it's the coolest thing. And so I think, trial lawyers, plaintiff lawyers especially, get a bad rep. And it's unfortunate. And, there's that old saying, nobody likes, a trial lawyer until you need one in your own
Yeah.
life, right? But by hearing and retelling their stories, I think it helps confirm for, Joe Q public at large that the work they do is important. And not only are they getting justice for their client, but they're probably doing something to make everybody's life better and safer. And that really feels good at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar and that you learned about some options to modernize your approach to case expenses and plaintiff funding. And if you want to get in touch with either of us, I think we'll have that info posted somewhere. So
Yeah, Absolutely, what Rachel said, and the contact information will be available at the end. We thank you all, and thank you, Rachel, for taking the time to share about the Milestone Foundation today.
Thanks. Thank you, Donna. Nice chatting with you.